All right, so it looks like we had a tie between controlling costs and maintaining data and reports. So I don't know, Jake, did those answers surprise you at all? Are they what you'd expect?
Yeah, I think that's what I would expect. It's probably the primary issue behind data usage. Makes sense.
Awesome. Okay, well, with that, we can jump into it and start discussing more. So the agenda today, what we're going to be talking about in this office hours session is data management. We'll be talking through some best practices for managing your data that Jake will be sharing about. And then we'll do a Q&A portion. So some of you submitted questions during the registration process, and that's what we'll plan on kind of tackling first. But as we go throughout the call today, please feel free to use that chat field or the questions and answers field in Zoom and submit anything that's on your mind or that you're thinking about so that we can address those questions on this call as well. And then we're going to give a quick demo of Mode's discovery database that allows you to query your own data usage within Mode and learn more about that. And then we'll share a way that you can connect with each other if you want to keep the conversation going. So with that, we will introduce ourselves. So Jake, do you want to kick it off and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Jake Walker. I'm the Strategic Accounts Director at Mode. I've been at Mode for actually just a couple of months now at this point. Previous to Mode, I actually ran analytics teams, both for marketing and advertising agencies, and I was also the Director of Product Analytics at MailChimp for a couple of years. So really excited to be here and talk to you about this particular topic on managing data.
Awesome, thank you. And my name is Jennifer Spoolma, and I'm the Customer Education and Enablement Manager here at Mode. And so I work on things like Mode University and other events and programs like this to help our customers learn how to get the most out of Mode. All right, so the big question for today is why manage your data usage? I think if you're all here, you have an answer to that yourself. But, you know, we thought we'd share some of the broader perspective on this that we see from all of our customers. And managing your data is a way that you can measure the value of that data and manage or measure the value that your teams are getting from your data and the insights they're getting. So a lot of data teams' impact is being measured by the insights that you're sharing, predictions that you're making, the models that you're creating, and just in general, the different tools and resources that you create with that data that are allowing your teams to make decisions and get insights across the business. And so making sure that you're managing that.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Well, we'll just keep rolling along. Yeah, I mean, I think all of these are pretty straightforward. There's different ways to be able to do that. And, you know, I think that there's probably opportunity discussion around what Mode is able to provide in order to help you more effectively, you know, measure this. And I think, you know, obviously the cost component is a big part of this, because as you measure the impact that of the content and the reports and things that your teams are creating, and there's obviously a cost associated with all that. And that's the challenge that we have with kind of federated or more modern open service models around analytics, is that it becomes a little bit more difficult to control kind of, you know, scaling costs, et cetera, which is why having a sound process, et cetera, built around that is so critical to being successful. So we'll talk through that. I'm going to jump to the next slide. Great. So we'll talk about tools. If you're not aware, you can go to the next slide. If you're not aware, available to all admins in the product, we do have this Workplace Stats page or Workspace Stats page. And this is really a high level look at your data, compute and usage and more. So report creation, query runs, views, things like that. It's not at a you know, hyper detailed view, and it's not meant to be, but this is available to any admin in the product, where you can go and get a quick snapshot of what's being created, how much data is being used, queries, total reports, etc. We'll talk more about the discovery database, which has even more rich data available. So great segue. If you're on a business or enterprise plan, then your accounts can be set up to have access to the discovery database. The discovery database has rich data about all of your usage on Mode. Welcome back, Jennifer.
I am so sorry, my internet just failed.
It's okay. I think at this point, after however many years that we've all been doing these things, it's pretty expected.
Oh, do you want me to take back over the screen share, or do you got it from here?
Yes,
Okay.
you can take it.
We were just into the discovery database portion.
Okay. Awesome. So had you discussed it at all yet?
Just started talking at a high level that business and enterprise customers have access to it or can get access to it.
Okay, perfect. Yes. So you can get access to it. What we have here on the screen is just some quick screenshots, but Discovery Database is really awesome because it makes like really rich data usage available to you, and you can use Mode to query it yourself. And so it's the same, the data that we're tracking, and we share it via Snowflake for you. So we have sample dashboards and sample queries to help you get started right away using it. And so we'll give you a more thorough demo of that further on in today's presentation. But if anyone has questions about it, you can feel free to start putting those into chat now. So when we get to that demo section, we can be sure to address them there. All right, so now for some data management best practices. So the first best practice we have here is to create a defined process for refresh schedules. So Jake, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I think this is one of the probably most common challenges that we see across customers is without kind of a defined process or standard in terms of how to think about things like refresh schedules. Sometimes that can lead to excess data usage that's unnecessary. So at least from my own personal experience, and then from what we see kind of across customers, a lot of the data usage concerns are usually more of a process issue than anything else. What do I mean by that? Reports get created. Maybe they were initially being scheduled to refresh every day for some particular reason, and then something isn't really revisited, or there wasn't any maybe initial thought around, as you know, like if you're combining multiple data sources together, the latency on the piece of data that refreshes the least frequent, right, is going to obviously have impact on that report. So if you are, say, scheduling something to refresh every day, but one of your core data sets only refreshes every week, only a portion of your data is truly going to be available on a daily basis. So that raises a question of like, do you really need to have the report refresh and run every single day, therefore using data that might not actually be getting you the most fresh and accurate information from all data sources? Another might be around the audience as it relates to refresh schedules. So if you're building something for a group that you are able to see only views it once a month, then that gives you some avenue around saying, okay, well, maybe I should set the refresh cadence for this to be every 30 days or every couple weeks or something along those lines, instead of maybe weekly or daily or whatever you may have set it for in the past, freeing up some of that data usage that would otherwise essentially be wasted because nobody's really looking at it during that time.
Awesome. And this is pretty cool. So as far as creating your own defined process, Jake went through and he created this like list of questions that we put together into a resource for you all. That's kind of the things to be thinking about for developing a process that works for you and your organization, since arguably there's different factors with every report you're creating, every schedule you're going to set, and so this is like a framework that you can kind of adopt and think through and adapt to your own needs. And so I put some of the questions on the deck here, but Nancy, would you share the link to the data management process questions in the chat? And we'll also send that in the follow-up email for you as well. Is there anything else? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think a lot of these questions are probably no-brainers. A lot of you have, I'm sure, have experience and think about these things. But if you're anything like me, I always like having a level of reference to just look back at and remind myself as a checklist to an extent. Have these things really been thought about, particularly if you're responsible as an administrator of overseeing, content or creation or kind of the management of that, that you don't touch on a daily basis. So you're trying to contextualize something that you really don't have any regular view into. This just have found to be very helpful in order to be able to provide questions back to maybe the content creators themselves of saying, hey, if you run through these, did you really think about this stuff? Like, we're seeing this report use a significant amount of data. We're trying to figure out how we might be able to cull this down. Here's some questions, get the answers to those, and that can help you make a more kind of effective decision around what really needs to be done overall. So this is a starting place. There's just some common questions that I like to ask. Obviously, you use it as you wish and expand or contract, but hopefully you find it helpful.
Thank you. All right, and then we have best practice number 2 as using Mode's discovery database. So we have a couple of more details on like why this is so helpful. First one is user management and adoption. The discovery database allows you to see who is using Mode, some of the ways they're using it, so you get more insights into that, as well as report management. So helping you to identify which reports are being viewed the most, which ones are most popular, or any outdated reports that might be able to be archived. As well as, of course, one of the top concerns is your database cost management, helping you to measure and control your data compute, and data security, of course, being able to see who has query data from which specific sources or tables, so that you can keep track of what data needs to be locked down and if it is or not. So now getting into some questions and answers from you all. So the first question we got during registration process was, how do you identify reports that are no longer in use so that they can be retired? And I'm curious if the asker of this question is on today's call. It would be interesting to know if you are on a business or enterprise plan, if you want to share that, as that kind of shifts the answer to this question. But Jake, you want to talk through the answer to this?
Yeah, I mean, if you are a business or enterprise customer, then the answer is to leverage the discovery database. There's pre-built queries that are available within our kind of help section or developer section of the Mode site. If you go there and you click on Discovery Database, you'll see this screen here, and on the left-hand rail, as Jennifer's pointing out, there's a bunch of queries that have already been pre-created and are available, along with reports as well that can be cloned, that you can pull into and use within your own Mode instance. And that's a really great place to start. These are obviously predefined and written by us. So if you want to make modifications to them, you're more than welcome to do that to make it more useful to you. But this is a really good place to start overall. If you're not an enterprise business customer, you can at least use that admin stats page that we showed at the beginning of the call, and then reach out to support or to Mode and see if we can get more detailed data over to you if you don't have direct access. There's always information that can be provided. And even if you do have discovery database access and you have additional question or you're not sure how to get to something, it's not documentation, connect with your CSM or reach out to support. We'd be more than happy to provide you whatever it is you're looking for.
Awesome. And Jake, were you able to show where that Workspace Stats page was when I was out, or should I show people where that is?
Yeah, no, we did not show that. We just were on the slide. Yeah, so if you want to, that'd be great.
Okay, yeah, so I have that pulled up here. This is in our demo workspace. But if you go into your workspace settings and you're an admin of the mode workspace, you'll see this stats option here. And you'll see more information than what I am going to show you today. It's just what we have data for in our demo setting. But you'll see this data about your compute usage that you can look through at kind of a high level. You can change like the granularity of these tables, but then you can also get some information about the usage stats, about reports created, query runs, and then report views. There are more detailed tables below this about like who's viewing reports and stuff, but just because we're in this demo org, it has just some of our mode employees information on it. So I'm gonna not show that on this call, but just know that if you go into yours, you'll find even more information than what I'm showing you just on this call, and this is where you can find it in the stats section. All right, the next question we got, is it possible to get usage statistics through API?
Do you want me to answer
Yes.
that? Yeah, so you can do quite a bit through the API. Essentially, anything that you can manage in mode, you can manage also through the API. The applications for the API is not just usage statistics, but realistically, there's ways to leverage it to create automations to shut off reports or change scheduling on reports. So some of the things that we were talking about earlier in terms of creating process and best practice around, when you start combining the tools that are available and you merge that into kind of a recurring process, there's avenues to automate a lot more of this so that it's not as much of a manual task. For example, if you do some deep dive through Discovery Database, and you start to realize that, say, the vast majority of the reports that are created after their first week only get viewed on average, every 28 to 45 days, then what you may want to do then is create something through the API to say, okay, when reports reach like X date after their creation, automatically change their refresh schedule to every 20 days or every 28 days or something like that. That's just a very rudimentary example, but those are the types of things that you can do through leveraging the data and then the API in combination to automate some of the management from an administrative standpoint.
Very cool. Yeah, and then also to this point, this is about the Discovery Database, but in a minute when we get to the demo, we will also be showing you the schema that you all have access to with the Discovery Database, so you can see what usage statistics are available to you in that schema. And then if there's ever any like data that isn't currently available in that schema that you want access to, you can send that as a feature request, to your CSM, and that is always possible that can be made available down the road as well. Okay, question number 3, can I set volume limits per user, data volume limits per user?
Yeah, and the answer to that is really no. And the reason for that is that, Mode's philosophy on kind of modern BI is supposed to be kind of unfettered discovery to an extent, right? You want people to be able to query and explore as necessary in order to get to the answers that they're ultimately looking for. So setting data limits at a user level kind of directly interferes with that particular kind of philosophy overall. With that said, there are avenues through creating, say, separate connections through through different credentials for maybe versions of the data warehouse or versions of tables that you want to make available that may be limited and restricted in a way that would artificially create data volume limits by not say creating a separate space where you only have tables that are the last 30 days. And you only allow people to, or certain sets of people to have access to that type of data. So therefore, their queries would only be able to produce X amount of data that you've made available to them to have available versus giving kind of open access to, say, the entire historical table for something, in which case then they could run a query that if they're looking for the last 2 years by day, it could be a very large, output.
Awesome. And we just got a question that's kind of an add-on to this, but can you set an organization-wide limit on how much data a report or collection can pull?
It's a good question. I don't know if you can set that independently, like from an administrative standpoint. Within your part of your mode contract, there are certainly limits that are set depending on what type of platform package you're currently on in terms of query return, in terms of data return per query, as well as obviously data limits per month. Now, on the total data usage side of things, right, if you were to exceed that data limit for a month, let's say it was 500 gigs to make it easy, and you were to exceed that on a month, you wouldn't not be able to pull any more data. You would simply be now in a flex state in terms of you'd be paying overages for whatever data you went beyond your limit for that particular period. On the query side of things, that is a limit in terms of the amount of data or size of data that the query could actually return in any single query. So that is already placed based upon the actual platform type that you're on. The maximum for any should be 10 gigs, as far as I'm aware, from a query standpoint. That's the max in an enterprise platform. But I don't know if you can actually change that particular portion of it organizational wide and say, okay, I know our limit is 10, but we really only want it to be 2.5. I don't think so, but that's something we could take back and see if there's a way to do that, or if you could possibly reach out and set that. Well, I'm just not 100% confident, so I want to give you an answer one way or another.
Thank you. All right, with that, there's no more open questions, but you are still welcome to submit those, and we'll keep taking your questions. But we can do a discovery database demo now for those of you who may be interested in using it but haven't yet done so. And actually, before we do this, I would love to ask our poll question around this. I think one of the poll is, have you used the discovery database before? So yes, and then there's 3 different options for no, depending on why you haven't. So did you not know it existed? Do you not have access to it? Or do you not know how to use it? Are the 3 options for your no's. And while people are putting in their answers, we did get another follow-up on the last question, which is there a way to alert via Slack or email or otherwise if queries, reports, or collections are exceeding a certain number of gigabytes?
Yes, that's a very good question. So natively within Mode, we do not have alerting. However, you can create alerting via like webhooks or Zapier that would work in a very similar fashion, but those would need to be, configured through that particular process. So it is possible. There just is not a native alerting system currently available in Mode. This is a highly requested feature request, and even internally. So, it may be something that gets added to the platform in the near-ish future, but as it stands right now, you'd have to use like a webhook solution to get alerts, but it is possible.
Awesome. All right, and I think we can close the poll, Nancy. So it looks like most of you have used the discovery database, which is great. And then some people, this is new information for them. And so if you have used it, feel free to share any feedback in the chat or questions that maybe have come up for you while you're using it. And then as far as this goes, we've talked a little bit about what the discovery database is already, but to kind of reframe this, the discovery database is what enables us to share your usage data, your organization's usage data directly with you through a database that you can query in Mode. And so we have a collection of data sets that are stored in Snowflake, and you can connect to that and query in Mode just like you query the rest of your data. The data is provided via a secure data sharing via Snowflake, and you can use this even if you are not a Snowflake customer yourself. So we still have a way, how we set it up is a little bit different depending on if you're a Snowflake customer or not. But just keep that in mind, you can still use it if you're not a Snowflake customer yourself. And then I will show you the schema. I think that's in the next slide or the second to next slide of what data is available, and all that data automatically becomes available as it's refreshed, which is at least once a day.
Just one more thing to add real quickly on that. Just the difference between being a Snowflake and not being a Snowflake customer. You're not losing out on anything in terms of the data that's actually available. The primary benefit, if you are an existing Snowflake customer, is that that data is made directly available in your Snowflake database, which means you have the freedom to be able to join it with other data that may also exist. So you have a little bit more flexibility there, versus if you're not, we're giving you read-only access to that data from our Snowflake instance. So there's just less capability of being able to do anything beyond querying that data directly with it. That is the primary difference. All the data is exactly the same. Just want to make clear there's nothing really being missed out there.
Perfect. So here's a diagram of kind of how this works. Jake, is there anything you want to point out or highlight on this?
No, it's super simple, right? Like we were saying, the data lives in Mode's database. And if you are a Snowflake customer, then you can see we create connection, push it into your own shared database or your own Snowflake database. Otherwise, it's just a read-only account, and that's how you would ultimately query. So then you get that read-only account, connect that up to Mode, and then you can start querying against that data. Pretty straightforward.
Awesome. And here's the slide with the schema information on it. This is like a little blurry here because I took a screenshot of it, but in our help docs and in the resources slide that we're going to share at the end of this presentation and send us a follow-up, we have the link to where this lives. And so that's the best way to access this information is via the link, because then it's whenever it's updated, new information is added, you'll see that right there. But I wanted to include at least a screenshot here so we could see it and share it and answer any questions if they came up about what data is specifically available via the discovery database. Anything you want to highlight on this?
No, I think the only thing to highlight is that you'll notice the schema naming convention is a little bit different depending on which table it is. So I find this visual helpful just because it has a visual representation of what's the primary keys versus what some other dimensions are called in different tables. So, right, for example, you have the group member ID and group inviter ID in the group side. That's really a users.id, which is the same as a creator ID in another table. So it's just, there's that little bit of nuance if you are looking to potentially join any data together across these tables at a particular level or layer is super helpful, but
Awesome.
want to point that out.
Thanks. And Nancy, do you, in the links, there is a link directly to this schema. If you want to share that in the chat, it's just if anybody wants to open that up and save it while we're talking about it now, that'd be great. Oh, and then, so how do you actually use the discovery database? So I was showing this screen a little bit earlier when Jake was talking about the discovery database, but in our developer docs, our discovery database section, it has like an introduction kind of explaining how it works, how the setup works. So if you don't have discovery database set up yet, it's essentially just reaching out to your customer success manager to get that process started. And then we talk about how to connect to mode. And then there's this section of dashboards that you can look through. So all of these are sample dashboards, sample mode reports that have been created around these different pieces of data. And so you can start with one of these by cloning them. And when you clone it into your own mode workspace, which you could easily do by, if you go to the bottom of any of these embedded reports, you can just click the powered by mode down here. And then it will open up in your mode workspace, you're viewing it, and then you can clone it. Once you clone it, which I did earlier, it's going to open up the query editor for you, and up in the notes section, it's going to tell you exactly what you need to do to update the query so that it runs on your own usage data. And it's pretty straightforward. It's just removing these sections right here, replacing them with your own organization. And once you do that, you can run it and you'll have these reports update with your own data. So that's kind of the process for these sample reports in here. And again, there's several here, and we do add to these over time if a need arises. But then we also have all of these queries, which are even more straightforward because you can just copy and paste these queries into a new mode report. And that's, essentially how it works. Is there anything you'd want to add on to that, Jake, before we answer this question that came in?
I think the only thing that I would add is when you do request access, we tend to basically make the access available in bulk. So we do it about once a week. So we'll get whatever, let's say 20 requests. And instead of doing them every single time, we'll usually wait, get that bulk, and then we'll do all of them at one time, usually on a weekly cadence. So that's just kind of a heads up that if you don't have access now and you request it, you might not get it immediately. It might be a couple of days, depending on where we're at, kind of in that week cadence.
Awesome. Okay, and this question is there a way to put data from a query that returns some metrics from the discovery database into our Snowflake tables?
From a query that returns some metrics from the discovery database into. So in this question, you already have a Snowflake instance, because if you already have a Snowflake instance, then we would go the route of the one where we do basically the direct connection on the Snowflake side. In which case, then yes, you could write your queries for the discovery database. You could also take that data and join it with other data that exists within your own Snowflake database. That's possible. If it's a reader account, then the answer would ultimately be no, in the sense of like an immediate join. I guess in theory, what you could do is you could write the query and then effectively download it and try to put it back in your database if you wanted to. That's really like it seems like a whole kind of mess to go around in order to do that. So on the reader account, no, there wouldn't be a direct way to be able to effectively do that, at least not directly within mode.
Awesome.
Let me know if that doesn't answer your question relative to what the scenario was. It was just based upon the question. That was my gist of it.
Okay, and then we got another one. Is it possible to share SQL query results across mode queries in a report? We have a scenario where DAs have reports with same or similar Snowflake queries repeating 10 to 30 times per report. Would like to limit this duplication to once per report.
Share SQL query results. Not that I am aware of currently. What you can do is you can create definitions in mode that are effectively, basically rolled up versions of queries themselves that you can then use in other queries. So if they're repeatable queries that you don't want to have to rewrite or copy and paste, you can create them as a definition. Then when you write subsequent queries, you could reference the definition, which in itself would be a query, but it would just be limited as a single kind of line or reference. But in terms of like the actual outcome or output of a query, I don't believe so. We do have a feature coming out in the back half of the year in the form of reusable data sets, which may ultimately get at the same thing that you're asking in the form of having a completed query that's in the form of a reusable data set that doesn't require you to rerun a query, that you may be able to reference in that capacity. But as it stands right now, I don't think so, just based upon the way the question is set up. Yeah, but definitions would be a way to reduce at least the amount of lines of code that you would need to write in other queries that are referencing potentially something else.
Awesome. All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, the last thing we kind of wanted to wrap up with was a opportunity for you all to make some more connections with each other. And so the way we're doing this is we have a Google Doc that Nancy, if you wouldn't mind sharing the link to this form. What's going to happen is you can fill out this form if you're interested in getting connected with other customers who are kind of working on and solving these similar problems that you are with data usage. You can fill it out, and when you fill it out, you'll get access to the spreadsheet with other people who have filled this out and are open to, chatting more, communicating more. So you have the choice to put in here how you would like to be contacted, what kind of questions you'd be interested in helping other people answer, and which types of questions you're looking for help with. So that is that, and we will send this also in the follow-up email if you want to, fill it out after the call. So with that, we really appreciate your time joining us today, and we hope that this session was helpful for you. When you close down the Zoom window, you will get a pop-up in your browser with our survey, and that's a survey about how you think this session went, any feedback you'd like to share. Any feedback you have would be really helpful for us to know what we can improve on and what went well. So thank you so much, and we look forward to hearing from you and seeing you at the next event.